Welcome to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast from WealthManagement.com focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. I'm Diana Britton, managing editor of WealthManagement.com, and in this podcast we explore some of the struggles and personal development issues facing advisors and financial services professionals, and how to get to a place of healing for mind, body, and spirit. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Advisor podcast, and thanks for joining us. As you may know, this is the podcast focused on financial advisor health and well-being, and today's guest definitely counts on that score. His name is Ryan VanGorder. He's the CEO of Opto Investments, an alternative investments platform for financial advisors, and he's one of WealthManagement.com's 10 to watch in 2024. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Diana.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. So a lot of folks may know Ryan through his work in the fintech and alt space, but many may not know the side of him that we're going to discuss today. I know I didn't, but since 1999, Ryan has done adventure racing. And in fact, his team was ranked in the top 10 of the world for a number of years. But just a little bit of background about what adventure racing is. It's a multi-sport, primarily off-road, navigation-based sport. But it's kind of, put a little bit more plainly, adventure racing is a scavenger hunt with a clock. The course is not revealed until race time. Racers navigate to as many checkpoints as they can within a time limit. And it's a team-based sport. But this is how Ryan describes it on his blog. Imagine a self-supported traverse of the Baja Peninsula or racing north to south across Tasmania, navigating only by map and compass. So what does this choice reflect about me as a person? Well, first, I may be a bit of a masochist, or at least I'm not afraid to step outside of my comfort zone and test my limits. But second, I like to test those limits alongside other people. Great, just great quote. But Ryan, just tell us a little bit of background about how you first got into adventure racing. I had never even heard of this sport before I talked to you about it.
Yeah, I'd say I grew up trying a little bit of everything, and maybe my dad gets credit for signing me up for every sport we saw and every club and activity. And so I just had this little bit of adventurous vein that had me wanting to try more and more sports. And I always sort of liked the wilderness, but really sort of came together when I was watching this old school race that Mark Burnett used to produce prior to Survivor, which was called the Eco Challenge. And I happened to be at a barbecue with some friends watching the Eco Challenge. Might have had a beer or two, and we were all saying, oh, we could do this. And the Eco Challenge was basically a 7-day race. And the one we were watching was teams racing across Borneo in the wildest conditions, sleep deprived, looked very adventurous. So we had all convinced ourselves that that was something we could do. And it turns out that I had a friend who was not just aspirational, but like to execute on that. So on the following Monday, he sent an email to us letting us know that he had signed us up for an adventure race and it was time to go. So we were basically in at that point and thought it was time to give it a go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so I know you told me after you did this, you did the 3 to 6 hour race, and you and your teammates were hooked after that. What about it got you hooked so easily?
Yeah, so the way they describe adventure races is usually what on the smaller races, the 3 to 6 hour races, they'd say the winners finish in about 3 and the average will be about 6. We happened to finish that one in 8. So we had some adversity to get through. And that was actually a piece of what got us really hooked was tipping canoes, missing checkpoints, going back, a teammate getting sick. We really did a lot more than we thought we could. And along those lines, we had a very material awareness of how many things we messed up or that we did wrong and that we could do a lot better. So we saw the winners finished in sub 3 hours, and it took us 8. We didn't quite understand that, but we knew there was a sort of path to a better, more efficient, and probably fun and competitive race. So it was nice to share that with friends and be able to decompress a little bit and certainly tell some stories and have some laughs over the race. But yeah, we were hooked and we wanted to do it a little bit better than we had our first go.
Yeah. So tell me about the elements involved in like the typical race. So there's biking, canoeing, running or walking, hiking. I don't know. What are like the different elements of each one's different, right?
Yeah, actually, it's probably a good place to start is that each adventure race is different. It's very seldom does a race producer produce the same race, although it does happen. Usually it's built on or anchored around a couple of sports, which would include foot travel, so hiking, running, moving on foot, some form of biking, almost always mountain biking, but depends, the technical variety depends on the race and the race producer. And then
Mm.
usually something on the water like kayaking or canoeing or pack rafting or swimming or doing something. And then there's some eccentric sports built around that. And all of this is done point to point, so no set course. When the race clock starts, you go through the start line and it doesn't finish till you go through the end. So you're doing things like transitioning sports, like getting new gear, dropping your bikes, picking up boats, getting out of boats, putting running shoes on, getting trekking poles and backpacks. You're doing all that on the clock. And when the races get really long, into multi-day expedition races, everything you do is on the clock. So you're sleeping on the clock, you're going to the bathroom on the clock. So you start to get really, really efficient at everything you're doing, and you start trying to figure out where to squeeze out time. So there's a sleep strategy involved for these long races. You figure out how to eat while you're moving, figure out how to treat your feet, keep them dry and without problems. But overall, yeah, it's point to point race, always on the clock, and multi-sport, and it could be just about any sport. And that's a part of the adversity with figuring this stuff out. And there are race sizes from the sprint size, which would be that 3 to 6 hour, maybe 2 to 4 hour. They have 6 to 12 hour, 24 hour, and then they get into multi-day, 48 hour. That's 2 days, is 7 day races. The longest I've done is 8 days. So that's nonstop racing. A lot of pain, type 2 fun, if you will, involved in that. But yeah, it's a great sport, super fun. You can always be better at it.
Yeah. It sounds fun. I mean, well, fun and a little nerve-wracking, but I mean, I know you've done a lot of these races. You guys got to a point where you're doing several a year. Tell me about some of your most memorable moments in your adventure racing career.
So without a doubt, our first expedition length race was very memorable and chiseled in my brain. It was really an extension of our first race. And what I mean is the wheels fell off 4 or 5 times. We had to figure a lot of things out and really just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And it was, I believe, about a 450-mile race in a place called Atikokan, Ontario, which is north of the Great Lakes.
Hmm.
And it followed the path of the voyageurs, which are the French fur traders, up along these route of waterways and lakes. And it was very, very rugged wilderness. It was really cool to just be removed from anything human, really, for the most part. We connected more than 100 lakes and waterways with canoes. So we did a ton of portages, that's picking boats up and running them on little muddy paths and connecting these waterways. We not only experienced our first massive dose of sleep deprivation and got introduced to what adventure racers commonly refer to as the sleep monster.
Mm.
But we got to do that under the Northern Lights. So we got some legal but very sleep deprived hallucinations along with those Northern Lights,
Oh, wow.
which was pretty wild and fun. And we really just sort of
No drugs
persevered.
involved.
No drugs involved, just sleep deprivation and sort of looking for checkpoints in the wilderness. But it was a wild race on foot, in canoes, on bikes, certainly memorable. And it was a nice way for us to really get into this expedition length adventure racing. I think there were 30 teams that joined that race. and we finished fifth. We actually finished after the official cutoff, so we didn't get an official finish, but we got, a high five at the finish and a pizza. But it was well worth it, and did more of the hooking us into the spirit of adventure racing. So that one's not going anywhere in my memory, and certainly is right up there. I guess one other memorable moment I'd throw out there is a race that we did in Australia, particularly in the Whitsundays, which is a chain of islands sort of towards the Great Barrier Reef, but it really highlighted the beauty of the east coast of the island of Australia and the geography. The critters were very legit. We certainly did some research on snakes and spiders. We spent a lot of time on the
Mm.
water, so that was a lot of paddling, going from island to island. We also went inland a little bit with bikes and spent a lot of time orienteering, but there was a couple of sections of that race where we were paddling in between islands, and one where we actually did a 2 mile underwater orienteering section. So they had put checkpoints under the water, and we used a map and compass while we were swimming with jellyfish suits on to go out and find these checkpoints and go punch our passports. That, just that section was really cool, but the whole race in and to itself opened our eyes to just the beauty of the area. Also, the competition is pretty stiff out there. Adventure racing is pretty popular in New Zealand and Australia.
Hmm.
Some of the best adventure racing teams in the world come out of there. And so it was really fun to toe the line with some very rugged and stout teams. But yeah, that's a couple of memories that I have that stand out.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. What do you guys eat when you're on these races?
Yeah, we eat just about anything and everything. It's
But you
funny when
bring your own. Do you bring your own, or are you just like picking berries and stuff like that? I don't know.
I mean, if we see berries, we're probably going to pick them because it's fresh food, but we carry a lot of complex carbohydrates, things, like goos and different
Yeah.
powders you can put in your water. But the longer the race, the less likely we were to eat complex race type food, and the more likely we were to eat anything we could get our hands on. So I'd carry Parmesan cheese. It's got a lot of salt and fat in it. I love packets of tuna and other fish. We love little packets of any fish and oil. I mean, we love protein and fat and salt. That's what your
Mm.
body is craving. So anytime we can get our hands on that, we always travel with a credit card in the long races. In that particular race I mentioned, in the XPD race in Australia, I'll never forget, we had a lot of flat tires, so many that we ran out of our patches and tubes. And we passed
Mm.
through this little town, and I went into the hardware store, and there was a group of scouts selling donuts inside on a cart, like a card table. And my
Hmm.
team was outside looking at maps and making decisions. I said, I'll go in and look for tubes and patches. So I bought every donut that this scout troop was selling, and I just stuffed my backpack with it, and I didn't tell my team. And then got the tubes, came out, we got on our bike, and then we got on a small Peloton and started riding down the road. And I biked up to, well, one of my teammates and handed her a donut. And the look on her eyes, her
Mm.
eyes got very big, and she got super excited. And I basically fed my team donuts for the next couple hours while we were biking down the road. But yeah, it's pretty funny.
That's awesome. So I know that during the 2006 Primal Quest race in Moab, Utah, you had a bit of a close call. Walk me through what happened during that race.
Sure. So maybe just to front load this, it was really a perfect storm of sleep deprivation and extreme hydration deficiency and some blood loss, and all that came together in the form of a pretty catastrophic event. But this was Primal Quest. It was in Moab, which is basically the desert. It was in June, end of June. It was very, very hot. We had trained not only for the technical component of the race, but also the risks that we foresaw. And the biggest risk there was heat illness. So we had all studied up on sort of how to measure for how our body was reacting to heat and what to do if something went wrong. And on the third night, we had an incident where we were actually rappelling off this big cliff, and we had to tether our bikes to our packs or our backs and rappel off this cliff with our bikes. And I used a type of pedal that was very metallic and snuck into my backpack and punctured my bladder. So I lost my water reservoir, which didn't mean I didn't have water. My teammates certainly shared with me, but we were just low on water, and we were already managing extra large hydration deficiencies because we've been racing in the desert for a couple of days. That same night, because it was so arid and dry, and I do get bloody noses, I got a couple bloody noses that night, so I lost some blood. And then the edge of that perfect storm was we finished a large bike section near the town of Moab, went into the supermarket, bought a bunch of food to eat before we headed off into this canyon called Pritchett Canyon, and stuffed a bunch of food down our throats and in our bellies. And then we pushed off to this canyon at about 11:30 in the afternoon. And basically what we walked into was an easy bake oven. It was
Mm.
a redstone box canyon that we didn't know at the time, but we learned later was about 126, 127 degrees. At the mouth of the
Wow.
canyon, we knew it was really hot. We were all still sweating. We stopped under the shade of a tree and talked about it. And we said, should we stop or keep going? And we decided to keep going. Lo and behold, we got a kilometer up the canyon, and I basically, my brain was still working. I asked one of my teammates why our other two teammates were still walking, pushing their bikes down the trail in front of us. He looked at me a little funny. I remember this, and said, well, that's the trail and that's the direction we're going. So
Mm.
uh, at that point, I don't remember anything after that. I guess what I did was shouldered my bike and walked towards the wall of the canyon and basically went down and succumbed to heat illness in the form of heat stroke, like a proper heat stroke. So not heat exhaustion, but I basically seized up, went down hard. My body had registered that I was overheating. And I think basically what your body does is it just hits the power switch and says, if you keep doing whatever you're doing, there's going to be problems with your organs, and we don't want to cook your organs. So I got shut down. And then
Mm.
because we had practiced for and were aware of the risks, my teammates went into action fast. And, my survival is wholeheartedly due to them. One of my teammates pulled out their bladder and started watering me. Another pulled out their survival blanket, created shade. My third teammate pulled out the satellite phone and called not only the race, but 911 basically, and they deployed a helicopter very fast. Also, uh, a small stroke of luck was that we had been racing neck and neck with another team for the whole prior day, and they came by at that time, and the four other teammates and my three teammates carried me up and out of the canyon a couple hundred
Mm.
meters, and the helicopter picked me up and had me at Moab General in a very fast amount of time, which allowed me to get treatment. And I had entered a coma and was in a coma for a couple days actually.
Oh, wow. Do you know if your teammates finished the race?
They did not. Usually, always in adventure racing, you have to finish, you have to start as a team, stay
The
together, and
entire
finish
team
as a
has to
team.
finish. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes when a teammate drops out because they have a foot problem or some sort of illness, the team will continue, but not as an official team. But this was a pretty traumatic experience for my team, and they stopped racing. I had got flown to Moab General, and then they didn't have an intensive care unit, so they flew me from there to Grand Junction.
Mm.
Maybe a side bit of the story is my wife is also an adventure racer, and she was racing with the team that was behind us on the course, and I had actually written down her as my emergency contact.
Oh, wow.
So they flew to a different canyon that she was in, ran out, contacted her, and then actually flew her to the hospital. She was part of the flight that then went to the ICU in Grand Junction, and she was greeted by the chaplain who basically delivered the message that she should say her last goodbyes, which is
Mm.
not an awesome message. And she was also 4 days into racing and sleep deprived, so a little bit of a curveball for her. But Jen's very tough and good partner in crime for me, and she stayed on top of everything that she needed to do, and was there when I woke up and was asking for a burrito.
Well, I mean, we're really glad that it turned out okay for you. You're here. How did that sort of near-death experience impact you personally? Did it, like change your life perspective at all?
Yeah, short answer is yes, and maybe an expansion on that is I think when you get close to the kiss of death, but avoid it, It's a nice YOLO reminder. That's the you only live once reminder. I
Mm.
think we all get those here and there. Somebody will shout it out to us, and we might have a thought on it. But for me, there was a high level of awareness that there was a lot that I wanted to do, and it wasn't time for me to throw in the towel. So I was going to continue doing the things that I do, which is be adventurous and get out there and really address these things. Some of them were life experiences, like having kids. Lucky to have two daughters right now and continue to travel and be adventurous. But the second thing I would say is to know that we're not invincible and draw better awareness to risk factors and really consider those. So for me, it was a real reminder that it's okay to take risks, but don't take my eye off the ball and always be aware of the risks. And so that's a very sort of personal thing, and it's something that's very relevant in business. And a lot of the takeaways from adventure racing and this type of traumatic experience are very relevant in how we address doing business, how we sort of partner on projects, what we look to accomplish over the long term versus the short term. And yeah, those are two things that stood out.
Yeah. I mean, can you expand a little bit on that? I mean, what are some of the business lessons that you've taken from adventure racing, or how has adventure racing kind of shaped the work that you do now at Opto?
Yeah, I think, well, there's this thing that seems more personal, which is to embrace discomfort, or we might hear people on other podcasts talk about embracing the suck. But I think
Mhm.
generally speaking, it's good things don't really come easy. It's not often that good things come easy. And for me, it's a reminder to avoid complacency and look for a bit of discomfort
Mhm.
in my daily life or on a regular basis. I think it comes in all shapes and sizes. So again, back to projects or bodies of work or solving problems. For us, something very relevant to us at Opto is the power of a high performing team. I mean, the calculus gets really nonlinear when you're attacking problems in sync as a big team. Something we're doing at work is developing a culture around performance, always getting better, building something that's big, hairy, and audacious, or at least the problem we're addressing is that. And we look to solve problems, observe those solutions, opine, and iteratively get better and better and make that muscle memory. It's something I love to do. I love solving problems and improving them. So I think that's very front and center for me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can see how adventure racing could help someone just become more physically healthy and mentally healthy. But I'm wondering, like, from your perspective, I mean, these are kind of elements of being a healthy advisor, right? Which is what this podcast is all about. So I'm wondering, how did it help you, find balance? And I know you were talking about, meditation came into your experience with adventure racing. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So maybe I'll talk about balance first. And I guess I've never really found balance, but what I found is ebbs and flows in and around the things that I wanted to balance. So for me,
Mm,
that's family, career, fitness. That sort of makes up pretty big building blocks around life. For me, finding that balance, it was I feel pretty lucky, and pretty imperative component of that was my partner, my wife, and also my racing teammate Jen. We had aligned goals, and she supported me sort of getting after the fitness piece of that balance. Made it easier than it might have been otherwise.
mm,
I think the work piece, well, there was a little bit of support of this sort of fitness lifestyle that came from my work, and it didn't, maybe I got in very deep. I feel very lucky to have colleagues and bosses that supported me having a very work hard, play hard mentality and a real solution mindset. So they didn't care how I was solving problems, just that I solved them, not when or where. And then in career, I feel lucky and really grateful for the fact that I've had opportunity to grow in career and work with really good people over the last 25 years. across my journey. And then, lastly, there's the family piece. And it's, my wife and I have sort of woven this into our family. It's existed heavily in the 2000s, 2010s, and a little bit lighter right now because the pandemic it crushed international travel. And then we moved internationally from Hong Kong back to the US 2 years ago. And now we're just starting to tiptoe back into adventure racing. But so those are the balance factors. And you had mentioned meditation.
Mhm.
I didn't really understand it, the idea of meditation. I understood that I was supposed to be leading with my breath, and maybe the best articulation I'd ever heard of meditation was reading the book Eat, Pray, Love, where they articulate what meditation is to the author of the book. And I thought, well, yeah, I think I've found that before when I'm breathing hard, getting lost in my thought when I'm on my feet. And for me, what I found was that particularly when I'm on my feet and also on my bike, well, I guess I should say also on a kayak too, when I find
Mm.
a cadence that looks and feels like autopilot for me, and I am focused on my breath and finding a cadence, I certainly get through this experience that I've grown to love, which is sort of washing out my thought. I do try to connect some dots and figure stuff out, and I get all those thoughts out, and then I get caught up in my breath, and then I might just basically get lost in my breath for, in some cases, a couple hours. And in these big long races, I've had time on my feet where 4 or 5 hours have passed, and it really just felt like the blink of an eye because I just really fell into the zone. And I'm sure that there's some endorphins involved in that, but having a little bit of a mission, being able to follow my teammates and getting lost in that thought. So what I've grown to realize is that's a place where I can hit the reset button. And to me, that's what meditation sort of really is in that space, which is just finding a place to get lost in thought and focus on my breath and do some exercise and enjoy it.
Mm. That's great. I know you've been taking a little bit of a break from adventure racing. Will you go back to doing it again?
Absolutely. Super excited about making sure that the components of adventure racing and adventure racing are in my life. I know my wife also wants it to be involved in her life, and that makes it easy for us. I think, well, what I have on the calendar is a couple of orienteering events this fall and the second half of this year. And then I'd love to get back to some of the sprint adventure racing next year, maybe a 24-hour race here or there. There's a couple of 24-hour races that are on my radar that I really want to participate in. And I'm definitely coming back.
Yeah, well, I look forward to hearing about it. Well, I mean, I'm afraid we're just about out of time, but I'd like to thank my guest, Ryan VanGorder, for being on the podcast and sharing his story with me, around adventure racing. It's just so interesting to me, Ryan, but thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to tell stories, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah. And if you'd like to reach out to Ryan, you can find him on LinkedIn, or you can find out more information at optoinvest.com. But Ryan is a entrepreneur, just like any other financial advisor. He has some of the same issues and challenges that a financial advisor would have. So please feel free to reach out to him if you'd like. But if you yourself have a struggle and you wish to share your experiences and help others in similar situations, please feel free to reach out to me at diana.britton@informa.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor. If you've not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This is Diana Britton reminding you that where there's healing, there is hope. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to The Healthy Advisor, a podcast focused on advisors' personal well-being and healing. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of wealthmanagement.com. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice. Always seek the advice of your healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your particular situation.